On tonight's program, we chat with Terilynn about writing female characters.
Make a great female character, and the best female characters that you're going to get are going to be people first. It has nothing to do with their gender.
Advice for using holodeck assets.
I would not try to spawn the asset on top of the player. It'll just push them out because of its collision.
And we brainstorm ideas for a follow-up to H2O Rat's mission.
I don't know if this is what Mark was, or H2O Rat was originally planning, especially since his original mission predated all the Romulan storyline, but it is too good a possibility to pass up.
Join us on the Foundry Roundtable.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701, maybe sometimes not so tame. With me is a man who also gave a friend a lift this week and wasn't given a 10 grid place penalty. Hippiejohn.
That's a sports reference.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
And we have a man who was recently banned from Star Trek Online for an inappropriate use of a manual steering column. Greendragoon.
Oh, well, luckily I'm back in. That didn't last.
And soon to begin his new gig as zombie number 7 in the Walking Dead spin-off, Markhawkman.
Yay, Mark!
We have with us a guest that I'm very excited about. Podcaster, panel moderator, massively Stowe columnist, and the only person I know of who's been a part of the Foundry community since the beginning and has yet to make a mission, Terilynn. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking me here.
We brought you on to talk about a specific topic, and we will probably do that first. The thing that was on my mind that I wanted Teri here to talk about was writing female characters. Now, I think I do not know demographics on this, but I am going to go out on a limb and say probably a lot of Foundry authors are male. I've personally known 2 Foundry authors that are female. Both of them, sadly, are no longer in the Foundry community. Right. But the vast majority of Foundry authors I've met have been male. The ones that I know for sure. And I don't know, some men don't excel at writing female characters. And so I thought I would bring up the discussion topic is, first of all, what makes a good female character? And, what are some good examples? And then how do you go about writing that? How do you approach writing a female character?
It's funny is that when I first got the email from you that asked some of those questions, I thought it was very sweet that you put in there, I don't think this is an easy question to answer. And I smiled because I think that therein lies the problem. I think that's the biggest problem that a lot of writers, and I don't want to put a gender onto this at all. It's not a male-female writer problem. A lot of female writers that I know have placed this weight upon themselves as well, thinking, I need to write a really great female character. How do I do that? The answer is insanely simple. Female characters are, as if you were writing a human character, are nothing different from your male characters. What makes a great character? What makes a person really get to know or feel like they know a fictional character? What is it that drives you to like or to dislike your villain or even just a secondary character? Gender has nothing to do with it. And I think that it's a great opportunity for especially Foundry authors to kind of tweak the way they think when it comes to writing their Foundry material. The fact of the matter is, because there is a large majority of male Foundry authors, there's an assumption that the player is also male. And when you trap yourself by writing dialogue as if the player is male, and that's where a lot of I actually will refuse to play a mission. I get in there and somebody assumes that either my captain is male or that I, as a player, am male, I'll stop playing the mission right then and there because I find it insulting. It's like, really? You didn't think that, of course, you get defensive. It would be the same way for any man for all of a sudden to be, wouldn't it put you off from playing a mission when you think, oh wow, they think I'm a woman. They think I'm a girl. That'd be weird. It throws you out of the mission. It takes you out of the game and what we call immersion, right? So I think the best thing for any person, whether or not you're writing prose or you're writing a Foundry mission, is to automatically think of what makes a good Starfleet officer. What are you writing for Starfleet? Yes? No? Then use the terms. And if you, when I first started doing podcast UGC, there was a great question is, what do you do? Do you say yes, sir? What if your player's female? Always defer to the yes, sir. You don't have to worry about yes, ma'am, because by this point, I think a lot of Star Trek authors have, even the official Star Trek authors, have all kind of come to the conclusion that the term crewman, captain, yes, sir, aren't gender specific. They're gender neutral. And it would be if female captains and female officers are out there, they're not really going to be taking, or they shouldn't be taking offense because somebody respected them enough to at least acknowledge their rank.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know when I write, I either defer. It's usually I'm kind of bouncing between either yes rank or yes sir.
Yes.
But I'm always in the back of my mind. Question is like, is this the best way to do that? Especially with the sir.
I can see where, yes, there are women in today's military that demand to be called ma'am because that's what, that's an individual's choice. But within the concepts of Star Trek and with the accepted norms in how Star Trek is being written now in the official novels and even in the game, it's okay to defer to the yes sir or to the yes rank or no rank, no sir.
That was something they did at the very beginning of Voyager, is that Janeway said, despite generally accepted Starfleet practice, I don't want to be called sir. She actually made a point to say that generally everyone is called sir.
Yep.
Except it was her personal preference to do something else.
Exactly. And that's what the beauty of that line was. Boy, I remember that episode so very well because I, as a female viewer, kind of went, yep, okay. She's an officer who made it very specific that you refer to her by her rank. Say yes, captain, and yes, ma'am, only for an emergency. And it became a wonderful little joke later on in the show.
Yeah,
when
like
Kim
we're
said
not
yes,
an emergency
ma'am, and she
yet.
goes, oh, we're not there yet. It was great. I enjoyed that very much because it added to her personality as an individual character. But when you're dealing as a Foundry author, you don't know who that player is. And I know it's hard to remember to write as non-specifically as possible, especially not only are you dealing with gender, but you're dealing with multiple different species, right? How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Including species that the player may have completely made up off the top of their head.
Exactly. I mean, those
that may not even have
a
gender according to them.
And that's what I love about Star Trek Online. I really do. I enjoy the idea of all of those different types of people running around and playing the game and being a part of that universe. I think it's awesome. Really do. But getting back to the idea of what makes a great female character, I think it really is just reminding yourself that what would first and foremost start writing a character. Women take a lot of crap for writing female characters. There's always those words, what makes it, what about a strong female character? What makes a strong female character? Well, it's frustrating for a female author to write a non-stereotypical female in any form, whether it be prose fiction or even in a Foundry mission. Because if you write a female character, there tends to be a tendency to make them too much like a man or to make them stereotypically male. And I'm using that word very precisely because stereotypes are in and of themselves negative things. At least they are to me. To say that a man is always macho, to say that a man is always, kick ass or strong and doesn't have any pliability of character, feelings, or emotion is simply wrong. For a female writer to make all of these kick-ass men, make them all stereotypical, and then to make a whiny, fragile, stereotypically female character is just as wrong. So what you want to do is you want to avoid those stereotypes. When you look at your favorite movies, when you read your favorite books, and you think about all of the characters that speak to you as a reader, as a movie viewer, or whatnot, what was it about those characters that you adored? What was it that people loved so much about Sisko? It wasn't that he was a male. Absolutely not. It had absolutely nothing to do with his gender. It was the fact that he was a fragile character who had emotions and made decisions that weren't always the easiest to make. As a matter of fact, he made some really horrible decisions. But those fallibilities in his character are what drew you to, as a viewer, to watch him and to either like him or to dislike him. Because personally, I can't stand Sisko. He bothers me to no end because he failed where I wanted him to succeed. And that doesn't mean he's a bad character. Far from it. It makes him an extraordinarily compelling character. Take Sisko, swap him out, and make him female. Would that female have been any less compelling? I don't think so. I think that it had nothing to do with gender. It had everything to do with the human condition.
I think you're absolutely right, and definitely mirrored a lot of things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this topic. And I was sort of going back through Star Trek and thinking, so what are my favorite female characters throughout the whole of Star Trek? And of course, Jadzia Dax comes to mind, and Dr. Crusher, and but the one I settled on is like one of my absolute favorites is Saavik.
Yes. What a wonderful character she is.
Yes, absolutely. And she is not written in Star Trek 2 anyway. She is not written as necessarily a female character. She's just a character.
She's an officer. She's written as she would be like any other female serving aboard that ship. She's doing her job and she does it well. And her ability to be an integral part of that crew has absolutely nothing to do with her gender, which is why she's written so well. She's written well. That's people looking at, oh, what a strong female character. No, she's just a strong character. She's doing nothing differently than any other male character would do if that character were male. And that's really what it comes down to is stop thinking that there has to be some way for a female character to be the same way that there shouldn't have to be a set of rules as to how a male character would be. And that's really the impetus for writing a great character, regardless of gender. If people want to test it out, challenge yourself in the Foundry. I would love to see people challenge themselves in the Foundry in dealing with maybe a set of Andorians. You've got 4 genders in that one. Are they going to act any differently because one's a Zhen and, one's a Zen? No, I don't think so. I think they're all going to act as if they were a Starfleet officer. Klingons are going to be a little bit different to a degree just because their species and their history is a little bit different. But the one thing we all know from canon and from what we've seen from Lursa and Bator, and also from Grilka in DS9, although certain times they have to go through a societal jump to get their equality, so to speak. They have to get what's quote special dispensation from the council to become heads of their own houses. There's nothing in Star Trek canon that says that they have to have special dispensation to be captains of the ships, or that they aren't integral, completely integrated members of their military.
Yeah, we definitely have seen lots of examples of Klingon female officers. Exactly.
And now that we get to see well, heck, they just released the fact that, now the captain of the Bortusk, the Klingon flagship is female.
However it is you pronounce that.
Yeah, I don't know. Bortusk.
I have to ask Sori on that one.
Sori or David or somebody. Yep. And so I was excited to see that. I would like to know more about her. Just the same way as I would, I'm a big fan of the Enterprise F crew anyway. But same thing. When you're writing a Foundry mission, let's take it one step further. Don't get too hung up on stuff either. The fact of the matter is, we were given some pretty stereotypical kind of species in Star Trek. The Orions are a perfect example of that, right? But they were written kind of to be that way, where the women are sexual and erotic and use their pheromones to control sexually the males of any other species, including their own. Don't be afraid to use those if they are character generated, and that's supposed to be true to form to the way that species is. If you're using, you don't have to worry about writing a strong female Orion, because let's face it, female Orions are strong all on their own. Doesn't mean they can't be erotic. So don't get too hung up on that.
I was going to bring up a good example from a non-Star Trek example.
Okay.
Which I was thinking of this week. I love to listen to like behind the scenes stuff and directors' commentaries and listen to how writers on movies go about what they do. And the example I was thinking of is Alien. The one with Sigourney Weaver from 1980 something or other. And she's, the character of Ripley is sort of held up as one of the great all-time heroines.
Agreed.
But it was not written as a female part.
Strange, isn't it?
None of them. Actually, I think they were all the parts in that movie were written gender neutral. At least to start with. I mean,
right.
Obviously alterations happen throughout the whole creative process, but the writer did not write that as a female part, and I think they originally even envisioned it as a male part, and so it's just one of those great things that, a great character, and it would have been a great character no matter who played it.
Yeah. Now, and let me think too, because I think in Aliens, the second movie, who was a member of the strike team? The female member of the strike team in that.
Ah, Vasquez.
I remember thinking to myself when I first saw her and I first started to see, and I was, again, and at the time too, because I want to say I had left, I was in law enforcement for 3 years, and the second movie came out just before I left, right around then. But I remember watching her and thinking, oh, her character is going to take a lot of crap from the more, I don't want to, how do I call it? The more prudish or the more misogynistic side of film viewers, who of course would think of her right off the bat as being overtly macho, right? That she was so male that she had to be gay, or she was so automatically kind of pegging her character as something other than what she was seen on screen. All we knew was that she was a kick-ass character who was still wonderfully so different from the Ripley character, right? You're talking about two incredibly strong female characters, but they are so different in their personality and even in their mannerisms. Vasquez was nothing more than a soldier. She was a wonderful, fantastic soldier in that team of soldiers. She was no different than the other people in her team. It's exactly how you want to write a female character in a situation like that. But who's to say? If Ripley was put into that team, which she kind of was, didn't make her any less strong, and it didn't make her any less female. The same way it didn't make Vasquez any less female. I knew she was a woman from the moment I saw her, and she was, and I think people forget that it's okay to still be tough and soldiery and militaristic, and you can still be feminine. There's just a different femininity about her, and that's what I like about her character and both of those characters a lot. And I can tell you, that's saying something for me because I can't stand scary movies. And for me to sit through scary movies just because I adore the characters in them, regardless of whether or not they were female or not, that tells you how good those films were. For me, there wasn't a character in those films that didn't enthrall me. All the way down to the android, and even Paul Reese's character, right? The Weasley guy.
Oh yeah, and that's so wonderfully against type too.
Right.
Because he's usually a comedian, sort of, the likable, sort of buffoonish kind of guy, your typical male. Right. And for him to be so weaselly and, corporate. Just absolutely beautiful casting there.
It was. In all of the films too, from the first one all the way through the last, they were all, and that's what happens when you write for character first. Everything else will follow. Everything else will follow. And translating, I know it's hard and I know it's extremely difficult to translate that over into Foundry, but it can be done. And we've seen it done time and time again where you can write a fascinating, absolutely enthralling plot, and nail every single bit where it's all got heart. We talked a little bit about, my favorite ones have always been, Ally Mack writes an amazing tale, and you can play those as any character and you still feel the heartbreak when, in City of the Pole Marie, you still feel the heartbreak of the bad, he even used a bad admiral trope, right?
How many of us have been guilty of that?
Well, technically,
and I loved every minute of it. Yeah. Well, that's okay. Evil ambassador, which we've seen in Star Trek and TNG, and evil admirals and evil.
That's one where they even have its own page on TV tropes, which is what is it? Something like puts the ass in ambassador.
That's great. But that is, again, when it comes to writing female characters, I think guys have an easier time of it. And the reason why guys will have an easier time of it is because of a preset notion that women writers are, more emotional or more sappy or more romantic. Oh God, the R word.
Well, but, I don't know. I think we've covered that one pretty good. Yeah. I don't know, Mark or Dragoon, do you guys have any other input on writing female characters?
It's an amazing thing. You'd think that,
unless there's a compelling story reason for it, I don't try to emphasize the fact that the character is female. I mean, because if the character is being written as a clerk at a desk, I mean, realistically, they're going to act much the same way, regardless of whether they're male or female. So
Right.
I don't go to any effort to distinguish one from the other.
Unless the story needs it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you would want, especially from a Starfleet perspective. That's exactly what you would want.
Because you always got to write the character that your story requires. I mean, sometimes you're going to need that sort of stereotypical damsel in distress, but not always, right? And of course,
it's funny.
And your damsel in distress could be a man.
Here's a really, really good example. I wrote a novel, a fan fiction novel that involved, female writers always have to deal with what's called the Mary Sue, right? The moment that a female writer writes a female character, there's an automatic, unfortunate assumption by the reader, especially male readers, that they're writing what's called a Mary Sue, which is somehow the female character is putting herself in the place, or the female writer is putting herself in the place of the female character to live out her fantasy. I'm not kidding you. This is something that female writers have to deal with on a daily basis.
I've heard that phrase, but applied to a different thing, which...
Yeah, I have.
I've always just heard of it as somebody who does everything right.
It's kind of, well, that's also an aspect of it. Yes. Mary Sues are typically the quintessential outsider comes into a genre or an IP and can't do wrong. But that's
and all of the
typically
interesting things happen to them.
And they always fall in love with the main character, and the main character falls in love with them. And then typically they end up dying in some kind of Christ allegory. It's just the way it is. But women have to deal with that assumption much more often than men do. Namely because of the fact of the matter is Mary Sue, which was a real, true, crazy character that was started, I want to say in the 70s, was a female character, and her creator was female. And ever since then, female fan fiction writers have had to deal with the fact is, we really try to avoid writing female characters because we don't want to be told, oh, you're just writing a Mary Sue. I had I went out, I was writing what I wanted to be a purely in canon novel, which occurred between Star Trek Insurrection and Star Trek Nemesis. Not taking any of the soft canon into account, just something pure one shot that may have occurred between Insurrection and Nemesis. And I needed to have the secondary character be an academy buddy of Riker's to make this plot line work. And throughout the first, 30,000 words of this novel, I was writing this character as this guy by the name of Tony Steele, who would have been Riker's kind of like roommate. And the two of them had that past history together of going through the academy together and going through some of the, the crazy stuff you do in the academy, right? It wasn't until I got about 30,000 words into it, which was about a third of the way through the book, and I realized the gender wasn't working. And I was sick, absolutely sick over the idea of having to write this character over again as a woman, and worse yet, having to make her a love interest of his from the academy. And all I could think of was, oh crap, I'm going to take so much crap for this because somebody's going to think it's a Mary Sue. And all I could think of was, it just doesn't work story-wise. And it's a great story, you guys. It's a great, great story. It just wouldn't have worked if the character had been male. I needed to have a mirror for Riker and Picard when it came to the torture they endured with the Cardassians. The whole thing is based out of Chains of Command. And I bring Thomas Riker back. well, the best way I could make a character fit between Thomas Riker and William Riker was to provide them with a singular anchor of their past history, and that had to be this character, Tony Steele. I turned Tony into a female and just dealt with it. And I was like, okay, well, hopefully people will understand that Tony, it's more than just a past romance, that Tony is it hadn't changed, her strength or his strength, or the strength of Tony Steele had not changed because I changed the gender. And I hope that people would have accepted the story, understanding that the Tony Steele character was so different from me that I kind of went, yeah, I hope people understand that she's not a Mary Sue and that really she started off as a guy. And the only reason why I changed her gender was because emotionally it fit the story better. And, so that's where you guys have to look at, where everybody, male or female, when you're writing for the Foundry, if you want to write for a female character, do it. Do it all with all of your gusto. Make a great female character, and the best female characters that you're going to get are going to be people first. It has nothing to do with their gender.
I think that would be an interesting exercise for a Foundry author, or even just any fiction author, is to take a story you've written or a mission you've written and pick a character and see if you could change their gender and see if it still works. See what would you have to change? Would you have to change anything?
I would love to hear people who tried it and how successful they were, and if they weren't, whether or not, what changes they found. Because I found I had to make a few tweaks to make the character work a little bit, but I would love to hear from people. You know, they can always find me on Twitter or on email and send me what challenges they had. That'd be fun.
That's one of the things we often do, is sort of pose a question to the community and see what sort of answers we get.
Love it.
So we'll put that, and we'll make sure to note that in the show notes.
Well, thanks guys for asking me. It was great.
Well, really, really appreciate your input, and thanks for joining us. And
it was great to have you on.
You've got something to do here in a little bit, so if you want to take your leave of us, that would be great. Or if you want to stick around, that'd be cool too.
I'd love to hang around, but I have to prep for the next interview. Well, I get to interview somebody, so
that's awesome.
Rogan, did you want to get an intro with her before she goes or something?
Oh, I did have one thing I wanted to say quick before you go.
Sure.
Well, one thing I did in one of the Foundry missions that I wrote that I was expecting people to react differently to was that I wrote a Vorta character who's female, whose basic reaction to interacting with the main character is to threaten to kill them with her bare hands if they don't do what she says.
Why is that so odd? Don't Vorta do that? Is that the issue? Or were they upset with the fact that...
Well, I remember female Vorta doing that in the TV show.
Yeah.
They usually threaten to have their Jim Hadar killed.
Well, that is true.
An actually violent Vorta, yeah, that's unusual.
Yeah. I would have to say that is that might be more of a nitpick thing from people who would say, "Oh yeah, Vorta they don't get their own hands dirty," but that's not a gender thing.
The way it ended up working out was that the people who commented on the character commented that they loved the character, and no one complained about it.
Oh, cool.
In part, I guess this is because it was a KDF mission, and that you tend to have that sort of thing more in KDF missions.
And I would say in a KDF mission, I would find it more believable for a Vorta to threaten a Klingon with something a Klingon would understand.
Definitely makes sense.
I agree. So I think that's right in line.
I guess in part I was nervous because I'd never written a character like that before, and I wasn't sure if the character came out right. But I guess I got it right.
It sounds like you did.
It's good to stretch yourself like that and write characters that you've never tried before.
Don't be afraid to take your lumps if you mess up too, because people will let you know. People will let you know, but that's how you learn, and it's fun. You have to turn yourself in. What was that, hon?
I've gotten a few of those.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, my first Foundry Challenge entry, I originally scripted it to end at a certain point, and then late in the design process, I added another section to the mission and didn't go back and rewrite the overall story flow, and people felt that the last part of it felt tacked on, and I guess they were right.
Something all writers have to deal with.
Yeah, I was going to say that is the feedback, and if it's constructive, it's great. If it's not, it's painful. Because there's nothing more frustrating than getting a review from somebody that tells you, this sucks, but they don't tell you why. And it's hard to take people like that seriously. So even as a writer, if you're reading something and you come across something that really just chaps your hide, do yourself a favor. Treat that writer like you would want to be treated and give them a review that helps. So, another piece of advice.
Very good advice.
Well, my love to everybody, and thank you guys for inviting me. And
it's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for doing it.
And you guys, the Foundry, is still one of my favorite things about Star Trek Online. So keep at it, and thank you for all of your hard work.
Well, definitely let us know if you start to get into it at all. I mean, we're usually a pretty helpful bunch.
Oh yeah.
Thanks. I'm gonna definitely use that.
And now we'll go to the news. And we have some unfortunate news to start out with. Most people already know this by now because we're a couple weeks on, but we were informed by Cryptic Frost that the powers that be have decided that the ability to make Romulan-only missions will not be returning. He did acknowledge that when the feature briefly made its appearance, it was by mistake, and he accepted his share of the blame in that letting that through. He did not offer much details beyond saying, I can see and understand why you might, this is a quote, I can see and understand why you might want this as part of the Foundry, but it is not to be. Now, I, in that thread, asked politely for more details as to why the decision was made. Others also asked, you might say less than politely, but no information has been forthcoming.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I definitely want to hear more about this. I mean, we have Cryptic Frost comment, but I mean, in fairness, I mean, he's a QA guy. I mean, even he is kind of hearing all of this secondhand from someone else. And so we don't have a lot of context on what this means. I think at best we can kind of take a guess that they ran into some kind of issue while trying to come up with, or bring in Romulan faction missions. And I have a couple of theories as to why this might be. And I think they mostly revolve around the alliance system. Because I mean, technically Romulans aren't really Romulans, except at least they are to level 10, but after that point they're either Fed aligned or Klingon aligned, and for all back-end intensive purposes they become one of those two factions. So how do you come out with Romulan missions for two different factions?
How do you separate them again and jam them together again for the Foundry to recognize them?
If that sounds complicated, it probably is.
If the rest of the game doesn't recognize them as one thing, how can you expect the Foundry to?
But I mean, I will definitely say that I'm still kind of disappointed to hear this. I mean, especially because, I mean, the Romulans' stories don't fit well into either Federation or Klingon. So it's one of those cases that, as much as there are technical hurdles to overcome, I think ultimately the Romulans are going to need their own Foundry missions.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think at the very least, if we ever get the ability to add tags, I'd like to see the ability to tag a mission as a Romulan mission. That would be very nice.
Yeah, I mean,
I had made the suggestion a long time ago that we just do this as authors, do this ourselves, tag the beginning of your mission with, brackets ROM, so that people can easily search for Romulan missions.
Yeah, and a number of authors have already started doing that. to Cryptic, may I offer the suggestion that, I mean, in the meantime, assuming that any of my synopsis before this is anywhere near correct, if you can't get Romulan KDF and Romulan Fed to basically have the same pool of Foundry missions, may I suggest that you then subdivide it further and make Romulan Fed and Romulan KDF missions separate. So they would more or less be like Federation missions that only Romulans can see, or more or less be like KDF missions.
So there would essentially be 4 factions as far as the Foundry is concerned.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking.
But I mean, it's one of those things I really want to see them fix this, not only for Romulans, but also for all of those other factions that they, in the future, decide to add. Because I mean, if you think about it, the Romulan faction is the test bed for adding new factions to Stowe. And while I think there are some benefits for the route that they chose to do with splitting it between the 2 existing factions, I think there are also a number of downsides that have come out of this. And these are kind of downsides I would love to see them fixed before they go on to add like a Cardassian faction or a Dominion faction or whatever faction they decide to add.
Definitely agree. So, now we talked about the possible technical explanation, which is they just couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
Now there's been speculation that it might be a philosophical thing, that they really want to keep those factions as they are, which is essentially in the red and blue sides, and they don't want to cross those over. I don't necessarily myself agree with that, but I think if that is the case, I think they're really missing out on a potential PR point here. Because they could have trumpeted this as, you know, against the sort of naysayers on the forum saying, you know, look, Romulans are a full faction. They get their own Foundry missions.
Yeah.
I think they're missing out.
Yeah, and
there is, there is the thought that, you know, from a game design point of view, a 2-faction, what essentially boils down to a 2-faction red versus blue scenario is a lot easier to continue designing for as opposed to 3 and 4 as you get bigger, even if it is just in the Foundry, because every new faction, you know, I can understand the decision. I don't like it, but, you know, it is what it is. And it makes sense.
And it may be something that they just need to come up with a tag that when Romulan authors get that, just a little check that says Romulan only. But yeah, I mean, all of the workarounds and whatnot related to this alliance system, I mean, it's at some point it gets very complicated even for the end user to really understand. In fact, I recently got a review for In the Shadow of Midas by apparently a Romulan player who was complaining about the fact that that nothing was tailored towards his Romulan warbird. And specifically, I think he was referring to the ship interiors, but it was a case that I designed this mission back before there was a Romulan faction, before they had even announced the Romulan faction. And the vast majority of Foundry missions out there are not going to take Romulans into consideration. So, yeah, I think it's a case of, I don't know, maybe they're waiting to see if people actually write Romulan missions. No argument says we need a Romulan faction for Foundry better than a bunch of Romulan missions that are forced to be shoehorned into either Fed or Klingon.
It's true. And people will write them. We've seen that they're already out there, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and
there's at least, I don't know, 4 or 5 I think that I know of.
Yeah, and one final note I do want to make is that, again, this is something that Cryptocross just happened to mention in response to, I think it was in the Master Bug List thread that I had added the fact that there was a feature that had been in and then removed, and I had only really put it on the list because I expected it to come back. So, like I said, I mean, I think we can kind of surmise that they've run into some kind of issue, whether philosophical or technical, that has prevented that. Basically, they've had to change course on this. That is not to say that will always be the case. It may just be a case that they ran into a problem that they couldn't immediately work around, and they had to say, okay, we're not going to be able to get this right now. We're going to have to put it off. Which does happen. I mean, that's kind of the downside to occasionally seeing under the hood, is that sometimes we see the course changes, and I think they happen a lot more than we think they do. But I mean, it's also a natural it's a natural aspect of game design, especially a living game like an MMO.
I mean, that's why when people always, try and bring up quotes from years ago about what Cryptic said they were going to do, I mean, there's just, I change my mind like 3 times every day. How can I expect a game company not to change course in a year?
Yeah, and they have to. I mean,
yeah, it's probably much more than 3.
It's constant. I mean, game development is very much trial and error, a lot like making Foundry missions. Sometimes we say this just isn't going to work. We got to change some aspect of our Foundry mission. Got to change course.
Oh, yeah, I can't
do something different.
How many things I've thought of to do in a Foundry mission, and I just, the limitations were, I just can't do it. So I got to find something else.
Devs have limitations too.
No, they don't.
Of course, as someone once pointed out to me, when a programmer tells you something is impossible, really that's code for don't bother me with that right now.
Yeah. It's not possible right now.
It's not possible right now. It may be possible some other time. You never know.
Yeah. Another day. Not today.
But there is good news to report because we did see a tweet from Captain Gecko. I think this is actually 2 weeks ago now, saying that they were having meetings, and if Captain Gecko's in on the meeting, that's a good thing. Looking at features to bring over for Neverwinter and looking at some things with exploits. Probably how to combat some exploits. I don't personally know of any that are going on right now, but I'm sure there always are.
Well, I mean, there's a couple related to. They're not huge, like the lithium exploits.
I like how you bleeped yourself.
Well, I'm not gonna. You're not
gonna give gold-plated instructions on how to exploit on the air here. So
yeah, but
right.
certain things are being taken advantage of to unlevel the playing field.
Because as anyone who listens to the show knows, we don't like exploits.
Yeah. So I mean.
Yeah. I'm glad that Cryptic is being active in looking at those things. Yeah. Because they have to be. They absolutely have.
I think this can also be taken as kind of a hint as to what we're going to see for season 8. Maybe the focus being apparently some crackdown on a couple of remaining exploits and hopefully some new tech from Neverwinter.
Maybe.
Good news.
I'm personally secretly hoping for the Nudger.
We would like to have the Nudger.
It would make part 3 go a lot faster.
There's also some concrete good news that I can report on that people can use right now, which is the tactical warbirds that came out about 2 weeks ago have been added to the Foundry. I just discovered this a couple days ago when I was just going through the ships that we have, and they've been added. And
you had mentioned that a lot of ships have been showing up lately.
Yeah, there was a big ship update right exactly when the Romulan mission creation ability made its false appearance.
I'm stopping myself from being really snarky here.
Yeah.
So instead I'm just
ignoring that part of that stealth update. Which of course none of this was in the patch notes. There have been just a whole bunch of ship additions, and I'm in the Foundry right now. I can real quick give a little rundown on those.
Tell us what they are.
Because we
don't have patch notes telling us what they are.
All right. We have the Ambassador class.
Yay.
The Andorian class is still bugged. There's a few of these that were added that are not working. You just get running lights and nothing else.
Yeah.
Which I believe you do have in your bug report thread. Is that correct?
I'm pretty sure I have a section on this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yes, we have the Tactical Warbird, which is an interesting looking ship. I gotta say, might have to use that. Find a way to use that. We have the Breen warship, the one that could be gotten from the winter event last year. Yeah. Let's see. We have the Chimera class.
Yay, my favorite ship.
The veteran ship. That is in there. Let me see. You cannot, I think, make it do any of its special moves.
Yeah, well, that would be.
You can't make it be a transformer. We have the Commander's Gig, which is the little Romulan scout ship from TNG. Let's see. All of the Romulan ships or almost all of the Romulan ships are in there. Some of the C-Store variants, like the C-Store variant for like the Eurydice, the new fancy looking version of that is not in there. The Romulan and Klingon veteran ships are in there. Ilachi ships, a whole bunch of them are in there.
I think
there's not really much customization you can do with those. There's 2 different material types.
Well, way back when Cryptic Frost was doing that list of missing costumes, which included all of the missing ships. Do you think that had anything to do with this?
Oh, it's possible. Well, the Foundry just crashed, so whatever you do, don't click on Ilachi Dreadnought.
I think that's in my bug list too, actually.
Yeah. But I can tell you from memory that some of the other things were like the lockbox ships are in there, like the Tal Shiar battleship and destroyer are in there.
Yeah, and do be careful.
The Steam Runner. The Steam Runner is now in there.
Another great ship.
Yeah. So, use some of these at your own risk, but there are a whole bunch of ships that were added without patch notes. But we've made that point to Brainflakes. Hopefully that will get some traction.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Take credit.
Yeah,
we want you to take credit.
When you add something cool, take credit.
That's really all it is. Plus, we'd like to know that they're there without just discovering them at random, I think, is a big part of it.
Yeah. Anyway, why don't we move on to what we've been working on? Hippie, start us off.
We do have one more
sorry.
For the Frost report.
Hang on, I'll edit this. And I believe Greendragoon has something for us with the Frost report.
Yeah, one little tidbit. We actually got a small update on the bug that has been affecting a couple of maps where it got the workable area got shrunk considerably.
Oh, right.
Specifically, I'm thinking of the ice caves and I think one other. He said that they've still been doing battle with this. They've traced it down to a problem that they need a programmer to fix. Unfortunately, the programmers are very slammed right now preparing for Season 8, so he is not expecting a quick fix to this, unfortunately. But, it's not off the radar, it's just...
now we know.
It's getting
awesome.
pushed for more mainstream things right now. So hopefully they will get through this eventually once the Parkers kind of get through the bulk of Season 8.
Yeah, hopefully. I'd still make the point that, I don't know, people get very frustrated at this when it takes so long to fix bugs in the Foundry. It happens throughout the rest of the game, and then, I hate to see it take this long. I understand that, they got manpower limitations and things like that, but, you hate to see it take this long. Because it does break a number of missions. Mm-hmm. Just completely break.
And it's certainly not the only long-standing Foundry bug.
No, as your master lists can attest to.
Yeah, I was going to say by no means is that the only of them.
No. All right, moving on to what we've been working on. Why don't you start us off, Hippie?
I'm working on cartoons. My mind has been full of, when I actually have time to work in the Foundry, I've been working on very fun costumes and map designs, playing a bit with triggers, and when I'm not able to be in the Foundry, which real life has actually kept me very busy the last couple of weeks here, when I'm actually not able to be in the Foundry, I've been thinking a lot about temporal physics, because what I'm working on is a challenge mission. Foundry challenge number 8, now that I can preview maps in a reasonable amount of time, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and make my second Miranda Mayhem mission and make it a Foundry challenge entry. So, that's what I've been working on, in making some really, really fun costumes. Dr. Kronos is real. He exists now.
So, can you tell us a little bit about some of the interesting things you're doing with these costumes?
It's just, for me, it's just trying to make something look like a cartoon is about trying to make it look colorful, because that's, to me, one of the things that cartoons do for you, is they draw your eye in because there's a lot of color happening all around you. So with the costumes, I'm looking for things that I can find those brighter colors with, and ways to make a character stand out. Like if people see in the first Miranda Mayhem mission, I did, bright purple on one character. I did kind of a bright yellow color on another character, and try to do that, almost tropey thing of putting different colors on different characters and just using the bright colors to draw people's eyes. Like I'm using a really bright blue on this villain I'm creating right now, but it's very subtle, but but where it appears you go, oh, there, it draws your eye, at least it draws mine. And, for me, I try to think in terms of the way that people's eyes work like that, like what draws attention, so.
Now this is for your Foundry contest entry?
Yeah, absolutely.
My philosophy to temporal mechanics is, whatever you do, don't do anything to interfere with the past. Unless it turns out that you were supposed to have done it, then whatever you do, don't not do it.
Exactly. And it's a cartoony version of time travel, so that makes a big difference. I think by making it a cartoon, it feels like it frees me a little bit from the Janeway headache of the past is the future is the past. I promised myself I'd never get involved in time travel. That whole bit, yeah. Making it a cartoon allows me to make it just more fun and loose a little bit, so I like that.
All right, Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
Well, in no way have I been slightly distracted by Stoutes Citizen. Thankfully, that at the moment is only one room, but so in amongst that, though, I've actually still been working on part 2. The big focus lately has actually been the last map. I kind of skipped ahead because, first of all, it was one of those elements that I could not nail down. I was having a hard time nailing down, and it was part of the map design. And you'll actually remember I brought this up before. It was related. I needed an astronomical phenomena that a ship could theoretically hide in. I ended up. I tried several things. I ended up with a ice nebula. So it's very blue, and I found a very nice backdrop that's kind of a cloudy thing, but the portions of the nebula that are on the map almost seamlessly blend in with the backdrop. So I really liked how that was turning out, so I finally settled on that. And unfortunately, as I'm building this thing, the question in my mind comes up of what is inside of this nebula. And it's something I kind of need to consider now, just because while this is the last map of part 2, it's the first map of part 3. So I need to at least have some idea of where this is going to go in part 3 for continuity's sake. And so I started to plan a little bit ahead. Well, this has actually kind of spawned a whole set of new ideas for part 3, which may alter my plan, what I originally planned to happen in part 3. And so this is kind of an annoying time for that to happen because they're too good of an ideas to disregard. But if I decide to pursue them, it raises a whole host of issues for what I was originally going to do. And so I kind of at least mentally need to reconcile these two ideas, and at least have some idea what's going to happen in part 3 before I publish part 2. Otherwise, I'm likely to have to go back and make revisions to part 2 after the fact, and that's I want to minimize that as much as possible.
Oh, the joys of being a writer.
Yeah, it's a wacky ride.
Well, I can actually finally talk about what I've been working on in more detail because the cat's out of the bag with the Starbase UGC featured episode series. We got our very own devlog. It's been posted all kinds of different places, mentioned in Teri's most recent Star Trek Online column on Massively, with a quote from yours truly even. So what it is we got a big 6-part mission series. With a whole bunch of different authors involved. I've been told not to give away details. So, nothing beyond what was in the dev blog itself, which the first mission is coming out soon. I think
it's Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Tuesday, right? Yeah, something like that, next week. The mission series is going to be titled Purity, which I can tell you is a meaningful title. I'm not going to tell you how. But what I did want to talk about is sort of the structure of how we've been doing this thing, because one of the goals with this series is to get people interested in the Foundry and get people interested in doing these sorts of collaborative projects. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about how we've structured it. So we have a big group of authors that are involved in this, and we have a project manager who is making a lot of the decisions about, setting up timelines and things like that. He manages a Dropbox and a Google Calendar for us, so we know when things are due. We have the mission builders themselves. We got 6 missions, so we got 6 different authors building the missions. We have a couple people who have built maps for each other. This is not exactly an easy process because there's no way to import maps. So essentially, you just have to record where you put objects, the coordinates, the base map, and put that into a spreadsheet and give it to the other person. I know I built a map off of one that Kirkfat made, and it's a lot of objects and a lot of just pulling one from the side, putting the coordinates in, hitting enter, and then go to the next one, and hoping it's all correct when it's done, and then making whatever alterations you need to make to it to make sure it works in the mission. And then we had actually, how we came up with the story, how we did the story is we had a sort of brainstorming session where we all got into Skype, and Hippie's been involved, so Hippie remembers this. We all got onto Skype and sort of put forward some story ideas, and then we had one person designated to go off and write the story. In this case, Captain P.F. Dennis. So he went off and wrote the story, wrote a general overview, and then broke it up into each mission, and presented that to all the authors, and then within that framework, so he had was like a 8 or 9 paragraph thing for each mission of essentially how it would go. Within that, we could, we'd figure out our outline and how many maps we need, and then script from there, each of us scripting our own mission. And then obviously we're testing each other's missions, to make sure that they're nice and polished when they go up for, everyone to play. We're going to be releasing one a week. It's going to go through the beginning of November. So I don't know.
How long have you guys been working on this?
I think you've kept it general enough.
Since summer. Since what, midsummer? Something like that?
Earlier. It was pretty early summer.
They were working on it for a little while before I got involved.
So this has definitely been a project that has been...
Yeah.
And certainly was
and
not...
we're getting support from Cryptic, which is excellent. Mostly through Brandflakes, of course. So we're getting, play on the front page of the news site and on the Facebook page and even and by extension on the StarTrek.com. So, using a promo image from one of my maps actually that I created, which I thought was pretty cool. Somebody on the, Facebook page says it looks like Guantanamo Bay, which I can say that I don't know what Guantanamo Bay looks like, so I have no idea. Although ironically, I work with a guy who was stationed there in the 60s. I have not shown him this image. So yeah, that's pretty much how we did is, there's not a lot of tools for collaborative projects in the Foundry. And we even lost one of those recently, which would have made this a heck of a lot easier, which is the costume importer. We had one person make the costumes, and so we had to just have him take screenshots of where the sliders were and put those together and put those in our Dropbox. Dropbox, by the way, is an excellent tool for this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Worked really well.
Mm-hmm. So really, I just want to encourage people in the future to do more of these collaborative projects. I know lots of people have talked about them in the past. I think it's been pretty cool. I mean, we've had our disagreements over things. I mean, I can tell you the disagreement over what to name the series. That took many, many nights to decide.
So were you for or against the name?
It's grown on me. There was one I liked better, but
so that's an against.
I won't go into what that was. But when you're doing a collaborative thing, you have to make compromises.
True.
It's one of the big things I like to say about a collaborative effort is the first most important thing for everyone involved to do is throw their ego out at the door, because your ideas might be great, but they might not be used. So you've got to get rid of ego at the door.
Absolutely. But keep a hold of your ideas, because you can always use them in your own project.
Exactly.
Some other time. But I think we've really worked well together. I mean, there's been some challenges along the way where we've had some authors have real life stuff and they had to sort of, bow out of making a mission. So we had some backup there to have someone else step in and make the mission and sort of, I'm handing over my notes, you can pick up where I left off kind of a thing. So, you have to sort of roll with the punches when you're doing one of these things. And I mean, any of us who have had sort of experience doing any group projects, even if it's just in school, these things happen. And so you just have to kind of roll with it. But I think it's going to be a great thing. We got the first mission coming out next week, and I'm excited. Because I played the first mission, Hippie has too, and I can tell you it's pretty good.
I enjoyed the heck out of it.
So we can't wait to see what everybody thinks. And I hope more people do these in the future. All right, why don't we move along to mission reviews? I know we've got some individual mission reviews, and then we're going to all talk about one mission in a minute. But let's do the individual ones first. Hippie?
I can really, I guess, talk a little bit more generally about one of the missions that I played the last time that we were all talking, when we were talking about part ones, and how I had played a couple of part ones week. And one of those was I played Overture Part 1 by Kinetic Impulsor, who is Tony on Priority 1. And it was certainly a well put together mission. I was impressed with both the map designs, the use of Foundry tech, all of that. I was also really, and again, this is general impressions. I played the mission a couple of weeks ago, and because of, the fact that Boulder flooded, I actually don't have my notes from when I played it. So, say the tech, the use of the Foundry was all very good, and the overall grand feel of the story was very heroically Star Trek is the way that I would want to say that, I guess. It felt very, for lack of a better word, it felt like a hero's story. It was super fun in that sense. It just did not connect with me in terms of the characters and the dialogue of the characters in the way that they were presented to me. I guess a lot of it is, probably one other person referred to it as when they played the mission, they could hear Tony and all of the characters. They could hear the author, Kinetic Impulsor there. That might be what it is, but it just, the dialogue didn't work exactly for me. I mean, it told the story, everything in terms of the storytelling aspect of it. I knew what I was doing. I knew where I was going. All of that works. But it just the humor and the character of the people I'm talking to, and some of the dialogue decisions I got to make with my captain just didn't resonate with me. And I'm really big on story, and like I say, I really enjoyed this whole task force overture, what the whole idea of the mission that you're being sent out on to join this task force, and I can see where the story is building, and it does a good job of being a part one in that sense. It just, another big thing that often resonates with me is character, and this one, the character didn't resonate with me, even though the story of the mission did. I mean, like I said, general thoughts, it's not an hour-long Hippie review. That's all I got. I'm sorry, guys.
That's all right. Greendragoon, did you have a individual mission review?
Not an individual one, no.
Okay. Well, let's see. I played a mission called A Price for Eurydice by DJX Prime, which is one that I quite liked. Which I want to talk about first real quick. I think this mission can work as a Romulan mission. It's not going to work for everybody's interpretation of their Romulan character, but if you are, somebody who really buys into the Detan way of going about things, which is essentially Romulans as, the Republic Romulan characters as the good guys, and buying into that, then this mission will work for your Romulan character. Because it's not a mission that, the dialogue doesn't go on and on about, we're Starfleet officers, yay. So, I played it as a Romulan just for the heck of it, not knowing that going in, and it really worked for me. I thought it was excellent in that case. So, as far as plot goes, you are essentially responding to a distress call, you end up involved in a search for space pirates. The space pirates kidnap members of the crew of another Federation ship, as well as some civilians, and you have to go track them down. It's actually quite a lengthy mission, and I think it could be tightened up a bit. I think there is you pay several visits to the bridge of this Federation ship that's going along with you. And I think some of those could be eliminated. Some of the dialogue could be done via communicator. There wasn't necessarily always a need to go to the bridge. And in a couple other places, he has a transition between a custom map, a sky castle where he's built a custom Federation interior, and a bridge, which is the bridge of, one of the Prometheus class bridges. And I think he could have just as easily built his own bridge, and you can make some decent looking bridges in this game, just using the chunks of stuff that we have, walls and consoles. He could have just built one onto his custom map, and used that same one again later. And it would have been fine. It would have been, eliminated a map transition, and tightened things up again. Now, DJX Prime is the kind of author to make a lot of optional dialogue, which is excellent, because you can go around and talk to every one of these Starfleet officers that end up getting kidnapped later, which I thought was pretty cool. It makes you, care about them a little bit more. You can skip it, which is great. I always like to have that option. Let's see here. He had a couple of maps in the beginning, a space map and a custom interior map that there wasn't really much to do on, just a little bit of dialogue. And so I would make a little bit more to do on those maps and a little bit less to do on some of the other maps, just to keep the length down. The very first map, you're supposed to be, you fly in to the site of a pirate attack. So, I would have them assist with some repairs, maybe beam some repair teams over to a civilian ship, things like that, help with medical things. You can do a lot from space where you're ordering your crew around and have some interacts and that sort of thing. He has some issues you go to an interior map on the civilian freighter that's been attacked by pirates. He has some things where the objective says talk to passenger when the passenger is clearly dead. So you wouldn't be talking to them, you would be, examining their corpse or something like that, or, checking for vitals so that you determine later whether he is actually dead, things like that. There's not really too much more. I really actually enjoyed the mission. His choice of maps were excellent. I would not have thought of using the Starbase interior from Infected as a luxury liner interior, but that was a really cool choice because it has those big windows and sort of a luxury atmosphere with lots of couches and things like that, lots of potted plants, and that's one that, anybody could steal that idea. That's an excellent idea. There was a weird thing in one of his captain's quarters where there was a patch on the floor that was really bright. I mean, it was like bright white, and I don't know exactly where that was coming from or if he could even fix it, but I thought I would bring it up so he knows. It's definitely a recommended play from my point of view. It can work for Starfleet or it can work for Fed Romulan, I think. So that's my review of that.
Cool.
Oh wait, Collectiveness Strike Gold Part 2. I played that.
Oh, is there a Part 2 of that now?
Yeah.
Because I played Part 1 of that and I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, actually Stoutes posted a thread on the forum about it.
So what did you think? But no spoilers.
Good. He didn't make the mistake that he made in the first one where he kind of forgot to explain things. So in this one, you actually find out a lot more about what's going on as you go through the story instead of collecting a bunch of dangling plot threads.
So you do get the plot threads resolved?
At least some of them. It's not the finale.
It's not the finale, okay. Good.
Yeah, definitely a mission worth playing.
Now, I remember liking his map design from the first one. So do you carry that through? He's got some good maps on this one?
I'm not going to say that the maps that he has this time are necessarily better than the ones he did last time, but they're still pretty good.
Excellent.
Because I didn't notice anything that I would consider an obvious defect. Probably a few minor quibbles here and there, but, nothing that really strikes me as something that's, best way to put it.
Well, you never have an exactly perfect Foundry mission, right? There's always be something to.
Keep me from trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of us are more not perfect than others, right?
I'm terribly not perfect. I don't even really care if these walls line up.
Actually, that brings up a good point that sometimes having walls that are weird, random angles actually suits the mission quite nicely. Sometimes.
Yeah, I would always recommend to people try and not make things square whenever they can.
There are a lot of places where perfect rectilinear lines make sense. Some places.
Well, it's always good to kind of mix things up.
Now, the other mission that we were going to talk about today, first in review, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more later, is H2O Rat's mission, which is, remind me of the title, guys?
The Rising Phoenix, Part 1.
Rising Phoenix, Part 1. So, we've all played it. Who wants to get started?
Well, I guess I'll start off by kind of giving a quick synopsis. You are basically called to Starfleet Academy by an admiral who basically assigns you to look into a starship she put an operative on, which has run into problems and has disappeared. So you go to track down and immediately start finding evidence of Thalaron weapons and hints of Borg signatures. And this quickly, you basically end up following this trail of this agent. And ultimately it explodes into this massive story of this, I don't want to give too much away, but it becomes an incredibly epic struggle by the end of the mission.
Yes, it does indeed.
And a Foundry author after my own heart, H2O Rat, ends the episode in a massive cliffhanger.
It's a great moment.
So why don't we kind of start talking about our thoughts about the story?
So I don't know. I really enjoyed the story.
For me, it lived up to the promise.
I don't want to give too much away in this section.
Yeah. It lived up to the promise, though. It really did. I mean, he says in the introduction for the thing, this should feel full of epic Star Trek moments, and, you should feel like Picard and whatever, and it really lived up to that promise. I felt like a Star Trek hero playing that mission. So
what about, map construction?
It's kind of got a mixture of both stock maps as well as rather detailed custom work. For instance, the starship you beamed down to, was it the USS Noble? Was it?
I don't remember the name of it.
I'm blanking on the name of the...
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a basic reuse of the that one map with the shuttle bay. But at the same token, I mean, you had much more complex maps like the that one colony you beamed down to.
Mm-hmm.
And did a lot of nice little details there.
That colony, that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and in most cases he definitely tried to really dress up things. I mean, the Romulan base that you entered towards the end was very, I would almost say, cluttered. But definitely had a lot of stuff in there.
Actually, I would say that a large percentage of the clutter on that Romulan base was one of the attributes of the base map that he had, because I think that was one of the base maps that has a whole lot of consoles and stuff already.
Maybe. It certainly wasn't a map I was normally familiar with working with.
There was one thing I was going to say during this point. It's been actually a number of weeks since I played this mission, so it's not necessarily fresh in my memory, but there is one thing that I wanted to, obviously, he can't change this, but one piece of advice I want to give to authors is don't put a spawn point in your map inside a turbolift. Inside, the
turbolifts are not
custom,
big enough.
Yeah, the custom turbolift asset that we have. It's not big enough.
Yeah, they're
your bridge officers will get stuck in the walls. Or, at least one of them will. That was my experience. So, I'd say, put it right in front of it. Because the door will open and it'll look like you just stepped out of the turbolift. So, that's my advice.
I will have to say, I thought the space maps were actually really well done. And I don't think there was a single map he had that it wasn't a very lively, full place. Definitely lots of, nebulas and places and asteroid belts and all sorts of visual pretties to look at in the space maps.
It strikes me as one of those missions where I played through the whole thing and nothing jumped out at me as really out of place. There was nothing that jumped out and said, oh, he forgot such and such. He forgot to put an interesting backdrop on this space map, or, oh, he forgot to name those NPCs something. Yeah, it was very polished.
I do want to know what he was thinking with that, scanning beam that he had in the Klingon warlord's interior.
Yeah, that did kind of make me wonder too, because it's not used as far as I know.
Yeah, it doesn't come into the story, and it's one of those assets that makes noise, so it's really your attention is drawn to it.
Might have been that he wanted the noise.
Who knows? Maybe
we don't exactly have a lot of sound effect generators in the Foundry, so
no, we don't. Cryptic add more sound effects and lights.
Yes. Lighting was something we've been talking about on the forums this week because we had a couple of guys post things for their big custom interior creations and post screenshots of some really impressive work. And then we were talking about lighting because one of the guys has it's a Federation interior, it's the Jupiter station he's trying to make, and it's very dark. There's some ways he can put some lights in, but he's very, very limited. And especially because it's got windows to the exterior, and he wants a good star field and make it look like it's in space, so there's not much he can do with backdrops, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think in that case, it's the best you can do is the lesser evil.
Yeah.
What was it? There was one build that was... I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I keep thinking that one of the props from the DS9 interior has a light source in it that you can embed in a ceiling, although it would give you the big oval-shaped...
Yeah, I believe it's like auction glow or something like that.
Auction light, I think.
Yeah.
Well, there was a Foundry author, and can't think of his name, posted screenshots for a set he's been doing for a Machinima series he was coming up with, and one of the interesting things he did in this particular map was that he embedded those plasma fires, those plasma jets all over the place because they give off a light source and various colors of ones. The only downside to this,
they make this wishing noise.
Yeah, they only made the wishing noise, but I mean, I actually was playing around with it a little bit to see if I could light it some of my custom maps, and it seems like one of those cases that just about the point where you get it out of range of hearing the noise is also the point at which the lights
are no longer helpful.
Are no longer in range either. I still need to do more testing to see if there isn't a very subtle happy medium in between the two. But yeah, doesn't seem like something that would work for an actual Foundry mission.
There's a couple of wall consoles that also make a nice blue glow to them.
That's true.
I don't know if that goes through the other side of the wall though. That would have to test that.
It depends on if, it depends on if it's one of those assets that's doesn't have a back that it'll shine through because it won't cast a shadow. However, if it's like a solid wall, then no, it'll cast a shadow. But I mean, sometimes you can...
I was thinking of one thing though, is that a lot of objects with a glow radius have a pretty small one. So certain objects, even though they light up, if you were to put them on the other side of a wall, the glow radius might not be large enough.
Yeah. But, I mean, you might be able to experiment in, like, with embedding things inside the wall.
Yeah.
I think we got sidetracked.
We got sidetracked a little bit, so, I don't know. I didn't have anything other about H2O Rat's mission. I mean, it's just a fantastic mission, and I recommend everybody play it.
How'd you find the gameplay, like the combat and whatnot?
I don't remember anything.
Actually, you just hit the one thing that could have improved for me. When I beam onto the colony, those Klingons are close enough to me that they attack right away before I'm done reading the entry dialogue for colony, if that makes sense. Because I know that's a pet peeve for a lot of authors, is to have something on top of you when you spawn. They weren't right on top of me, but they were close enough that they see me, and they're Klingon and I'm Federation, and so they didn't like me very much.
Yeah, I will sometimes surround the author or the player in a invisible wall cage until the dialogue is complete, just to prevent those kind of things.
Yeah, that's the only bit of anything that caused me any issue with it at all. And that's in gameplay.
I don't remember hitting my head against the wall as far as difficulty goes.
Yeah, not at all.
Did you find it a challenge at all?
I can't remember back that far.
For me, the main aspect of it that was somewhat challenging is the fact that he did a good job of making it so that you don't always see the enemies coming. That's one of the things that I find to make combat exciting, is whether or not I can guess when I'm about to get attacked. And in his case, he actually did a reasonably good job of making me wonder where the enemies were hiding.
You build that suspense doing that, which is a very difficult thing to do in the Foundry, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, overall thoughts?
Definitely a must-play for anybody.
Yeah, definitely everyone should play that mission. It's definitely in my top 3 that I've ever played.
I know a lot of people have been talking about it lately because, of course, of H2O Rat's death a few weeks ago, but I mean, it really does deserve it. It really is a fantastic mission.
Yeah. I mean, and part of me is, I mean, it was really happy to have a developer put in a Foundry mission, even if he can't be with us anymore.
We wish more of them would go for it and give it a shot.
I want to see Brand Flakes make a Foundry mission.
I don't know when Brand Flakes would have time.
With his love of PvP, it would probably be a very difficult mission.
I bet.
PvPers tend to make very hard missions.
Yeah,
because they know tactics.
Yep.
That does not mean that it would be bad, though. And I mean, he's definitely someone who's got a deep passion for Star Trek.
The game,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Dan or even Gecko try to come up with a mission. But we already know Dan has a talent for mission making.
Yeah, like you want to see Dan come up with a mission, go play the Klingon tutorial and, those first missions. There you go.
Yeah, I have to say, the new Klingon tutorial, that is awesome.
So we're just going to do a couple of discussion topics tonight since we had that nice long one with Teri. So, Dragoon, get us started with our tech topic.
So, new tech topic this week. This one is kind of inspired by a question someone asked on the forums, and that was the subject of the holodeck assets. And so I thought we would we have a number of holodeck assets in the Foundry, specifically designed for making it appear that you start out on a holodeck grid, having it disappear so it appears as if a program is running, and then later on having the grid reappear and make it look like you've returned to the holodeck or the program is shut off. So this is one of those.
At least that's what it's supposed to do.
And believe it or not, it actually works really well. And the way it works, though, is not as obvious. I mean, it's working within the limitations of the Foundry, so it's built around those, and it can be kind of hard to understand. But it does actually do what it was designed to do rather well.
You're going to help us understand how, correct?
We are.
Excellent.
Yay.
This is real consumer advice here.
So, Jorgen, you had actually mentioned that you have worked with these assets before.
Indeed, I have. I made 3 missions on the KDF side that are designed to play like holodeck programs, where people take the part of the 3 great Klingon warriors, Kang, Kor, and Koloth, in their great historical battles. So each mission starts with you enter at a door on the Kronos shipyards, and you spawn inside one of these holodeck assets. And then the only thing you see is a console. When you click the console to start the program, the holodeck asset disappears around you and shows you the map that's already there outside of it, essentially making it look like it fades out and, the holodeck program fades in.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it was one of those assets that got added into the Foundry early, and I think it was a result of like a very specific request. Just because I wasn't.
I seem to remember on the old message board before the forum change that that was an asset that someone had posted a request for.
Yeah, and so
it was a very long time ago.
Update.
Yeah, but I mean,
prior the dilithium thing.
Oh, I think this was before the free-to-play conversion. Way back when I was only a Foundry lurker and not an actual Foundry author. But there are basically 3 assets that the player needs to know out. There's first Holodeck 01, which is your full holodeck asset. It's solid. You can spawn the character inside of it. I would not try to spawn the asset on top of the player. It'll just push him out because of its collision. But that said, the other 2 assets that come with it kind of help out with this. The other assets you need to know are Holodeck 01 Fade Out and Holodeck 01 Fade In. So let's first off talk about how do we set up or start out in the holodeck and then make it appear that the holodeck is dissolving into the holographic scene, which I guess I'll take point on.
I was going to say, I unfortunately haven't watched.
That one's fairly simple. So you just, you put the player inside, you put the spawn point inside the holodeck program, or, the holodeck asset, the holodeck 01. Yeah. Now I had a heck of a time making sure that nothing else was inside there. I mean, if you're using it on a pre-baked map, you gotta make sure that the floor is just a little bit off. The floor of the holodeck asset is just a little bit off the floor of the underlying map. And you gotta make sure that nothing is sticking up inside of it. So you gotta have a nice open map. I had to raise up the holodeck
quite a bit.
Yes.
So I think I had to put it at 3.8 in order to get it just above the ground level.
You know what, real quick, let me pause this.
Uh-oh. We appear to have lost the Drogon.
I think he's doing something.
Might be.
Sorry, I was, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There he is.
Okay. Sorry, I had it muted. I'm just gonna quick open up this Foundry project.
Yeah,
so I can have it look at, so I'm looking at it. Let's see.
While you're talking about it, yes.
Yeah. Remember which of the 3 I was wanting to open. Cause I've got them all fading into different things. I've got one of them on a big open ground map. I got one of them on the old First City exterior. And I've got one of them that fades into a custom ship interior and bridge. Supposedly to be like an old D7 or something like that.
Well, let me know when you're ready to continue.
Actually, the custom one was the easiest. Cause I can manipulate it more.
Now, did you ever attempt to make the holodeck grid reappear?
I did, and it didn't work because, of course, it would push me out if you use holodeck 01, because it treats it almost like a solid object, and it pushes any NPCs or anything out of the way.
Same thing happens if you try to use the transporter.
Okay, so I've got this open now. Okay, so what I've got here is the holodeck sitting on top of the old First City, the Kronos Great Hall exterior map, which is the old First City map. So, I have got holodeck 01, and I've got it at 1.99 above the ground level. So you do have to raise it up a bit to make sure that the 0 point is not at the floor. So you gotta raise it up a bit.
Yeah. And you definitely need like lots of extra space to have the grid, because the grid is actually quite large. By my counts, it's about 43, 44 across, which is, I mean, it's surprisingly large. So you need like a big open field or a big open space, and you can't just like do this in a hallway, otherwise your hallways are going to be jutting through.
Now, I actually got around this because there were two things I wanted to get around. One was that the holodeck has an arch built into it, and it's a Federation-looking arch. Now, I was on the KDF side, so I didn't want that. So I wanted it to just be a completely enclosed holodeck grid. I thought that was the best way to go about it. So I actually put two of them together, made two of them. I don't know what's the right word for this. Maybe I'll put a little image or something.
You placed two objects on the map, rotated one of them 180 degrees, and moved it off center so that the parts of the holodeck with the arches were not visible from inside the holodeck.
Okay, yeah. So you basically...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you overlapped them.
I overlapped them. That's the word I'm looking for. Overlapped. And exactly what Mark said. And then, so there's a console in the middle of these that when you interact with, those despawn, and there's two holodeck fade out assets that I put at exactly the same coordinates as the holodeck 01, and those spawn in. Now when those spawn in, when those go from hidden to visible, they essentially do the fade out animation, then they're gone. There's no collision with those after that.
Yeah, the transitional states have no collision, which will actually become a very important point here when we talk about getting the holodeck grid back. So yeah, basically the idea, or the way it works is you have your trigger object, whether it be a console or just an invisible object, and then you have your holodeck 01, which is your hard and fast room. I mean, this has all the collision, and you're basically start out inside this. What happens is once you activate your trigger, you're going to swap out your holodeck 01 for holodeck 01 fade out. And holodeck 01 fade out has no collision, so you'll actually immediately drop to the true floor. And that starts out as what looks like a solid grid and then fades out. And once it's fade out, it's invisible for the rest of it, so you don't have to worry about it. And literally, I mean, this fade out is actually described in the description as an effect. So yeah, there's no solid geometry to it. And
you want to make sure that you put it at exactly the same coordinates as your holodeck 01 asset.
Yep, same coordinates, same rotation, and they'll line up seamlessly, and it works. I mean, it works really well. I mean, once you kind of get used to it, so the next step is that once you've run your holodeck program and done everything you want to do, I mean, I'm sure you want to have at the end of your mission to have the program end and the holograph grid comes back. This is a little bit trickier. First and foremost, you can't use holodeck 01 because its collision will, if you try to spawn it on top of the player, it'll push the player out to the sides. It won't force them inside the holodeck grid. So that's pretty much out. I mean, however, that doesn't mean we can't do it in. We specifically use holodeck 01 fade in, which is basically like fade out, except it works in reverse. It starts out as invisible and then fades into what appears to be a holodeck grid. Now the downside to this is that the holodeck, like it's a fade out, it's not solid. I'm sorry, I had to cough there. Okay, so like a fade out, it has no collision. And so if the character tries to like run to the edge of the holodeck, they'll run right through the wall and back out into the world. So what you actually have to do is put in some invisible walls to act as collision. And since these invisible walls are not solid or not a single object, you don't have to worry about it pushing out the player or anything like that. I'm actually, at the moment, I've gone through and mapped out exactly where each wall needs to be because this is an effect, all you get is the origin point. You can't actually see it on the Foundry editor. And so you could spend like an hour or so through trial and error trying to figure out exactly where each edge of the holodeck is. I'm going to save you a bunch of time and say that I already spent that hour and mapped out where each wall needs to be in order to fade this back. So you'll basically have 4 walls on each end of the holodeck grid, plus probably 2 narrower invisible walls to basically act as the collision for the arch. But yeah, I mean, once you have that...
Actually, for the arch collision, couldn't you just fade in a real holodeck arch? Because there's a separate cost for that. I
thought about that, and I decided that invisible walls would be better because the grid is fading in. It's not a off and on like a normal trigger would be. It's invisible and then fades in over like a second, including the arch. If you use an actual arch, the arch is just going to pop in instead of like the rest of the grid fading in.
Maybe you can make the arch pop in with a second trigger that is tripped like a half a second or whatever after you fade in the rest of it. But that would be a bit more complicated.
Yeah, you could, but I mean, 2 narrow invisible walls in place, and basically I will include the coordinates. I'm actually going to do this up in a graphic and then give it to Drogon so he can include it in with the show notes. So everyone go look at the show notes. Valuable Foundry secrets are held there. And that'll basically map out exactly all the coordinates you need based on the origin point of your final fade-in asset. And yeah, I mean, once you're set there, I mean, you're good to go.
I'm gonna definitely test that out because I wanted to end those missions the same way I began them, which is, holodeck.
Yeah.
Now, I will point out there's one other sort of little alternative to holodeck making things, which is, we do have access to the arch, and essentially an open arch with the door open. So in one of my other missions, I had the player walk down a corridor, then, turn a corner, and there's the open arch and the holodeck program already running inside.
Yeah.
So,
and, I mean,
you can do it that way.
I will also point out that one of the interactable objects at Starfleet Academy is the console for one of the holodecks. So you can do something where you are told to go to the specific holodeck at Starfleet Academy, and the console ends up being the doorway to the next map, which is the program running. Obviously, there would be no fade in or out, and then the idea is that the program started during the map loading. But that works pretty well too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually seen that one done before, and that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing to point out is that these since these holodeck assets were added quite a while, they are actually in the style of TNG, where you had the black room with the yellow grid. They are not in the style of all the holodecks that we have in game, which are modeled after the Voyager holodecks with like weird patterny.
Didn't the holodeck they had in DS9 look similar to that?
DS9 had the holosuites.
Actually, I don't remember.
Yeah, which was Quark's, they were the Cardassian engineering style.
Yeah, there were those like small rooms with the...
Oh.
Yeah. So, moving along to our other topic for the night, which was, I'm going to put a spoiler warning here, so if you don't want to be spoiled for anything in H2O Rat's mission, turn your podcast off now. Because our final topic for the evening is going to be talking about part 2 of his mission. There's been some discussion of it, as sort of like a tribute to him, making some way of making a part 2, of continuing the story. So there's really 2 parts to this, and the first one is how to do it. And the other one is, what sort of plotline the mission might take. We thought we'd have fun brainstorming of that. But first of all is, how would we do it? How would we go about making a part 2? And there's many, many different ways to do this. Obviously, someone could just take it upon themselves to make a part 2. You could have some kind of collaborative project. You could make it a Foundry challenge. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think Foundry challenge is quite the best way of doing it, simply because of the fact that you would end up with a dozen or so part 2s, and that would just get really...
Yeah, I know there was a lot of resistance to making it a challenge.
I think what we talked about before the show, doing it as that kind of a challenge, would be the way that would make it acceptable, because I think a lot of people want to express, both their love for what Mark created and also, want to use the Foundry. They loved the mission, whatever the reason is. There's obviously people out there who want to do something with that, and rather than making it like a challenge that has a winner, just make it a community event or a community challenge where whoever wants to makes a mission. Good, bad, indifferent, new authors that have been doing this forever. Whoever wants to creates a mission, and they don't have to spotlight all of them or anything like that. But they could do a community. These are all of the missions, that are paying respect and, whatever. That, like a memorial type of thing would.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, because I would love to see sort of the various different takes on it that people might have.
Yeah, so would I.
The more variety, the better, and that's kind of what I was thinking, and sort of forego the usual voting on them and deciding a winner, and just put up a nice blog on the front page saying, this is how people thought that the mission could continue.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely be good, and I mean, I definitely see it as a kind of a great community event and a great Foundry event.
And of course, the other way would be to get a group of people together like we're doing with the big Foundry featured episode series and do a collaborative project where you get lots of different people inputting on the story, and then, one person to make the mission itself with some help, maybe with, other people making costumes or writing the script for them, things like that, which could be cool. I mean, as we're proving, it does work.
Yeah.
You can make it work. There's not exactly a lot of tools to facilitate it, but it can certainly work.
Do you think they could do something where authors submit their outlines for how they think it could work ahead of time, and then decided on one to kind of proceed on?
No, I don't like the idea of, at least surrounding this, I don't like the idea of choosing one idea, or, this is something we're never going to know what the actual intention was. So trying to say that any one person's interpretation was the one they're going to go with, or, I like the idea of it just, these are people paying their, showing us what they would have done, as a big community event. That kind of works for me, but having any one thing be followed up on doesn't work for me.
I mean, I guess there is an argument that there have been many people who have, or many authors who have done follow-up missions to other authors' missions.
I don't know about many, but there certainly have been some.
Yeah.
Now, Hippie, when we were talking about this before the show, you actually brought up the point of, doesn't necessarily need a part 2 at all.
Mm-hmm. For my mind, I'd be interested in seeing what people do. But quite honestly, the circumstances of the whole thing, I had played the mission a long time ago, and I played it again. It got re-spotlighted, and maybe it's the circumstances of the whole thing, but I'm totally okay with having what is, quite frankly, one of my very favorite Foundry missions as what is almost picture perfect part 1 cliffhanger type of, it's really such a great mission that I'm okay with just leaving it alone and saying this is what somebody who really loves the Foundry can do with it. I'm kind of okay with that.
All right. So that's some of the options of sort of how to go about doing it. So I thought it'd be fun for our last thing for the evening to sort of brainstorm, where could the plot go? And there's just all kinds of different possibilities, because of course it ends on a big cliffhanger of, spoiler, you going through a temporal portal created by a Romulan faction that's been experimenting with the Omega particle and Borg technology.
And specifically this Romulan general, who thinks he's mastered Borg technology.
So I think the first thing I would decide is, what time would we go to?
Well, I think we can pretty safely assume that the portal led into the past. I mean, the general is going on about restoring the glory of the Empire.
Right, the glory of the Empire.
He's only going to do that from the past.
It would be very interesting if he was to go back in time and fight Hakeev, trying to prevent the Hobus disaster.
Yeah, that was my thought, is to some way have him try to prevent the destruction of Romulus. In some way. I mean, there's many different ways you could try and do that. And I don't know, that would create an interesting moral dilemma.
My mind is dark because I kind of went to the same thing. Like, he's obviously going to the past. He's obviously trying to, maybe not obviously, but in my mind, what I was reading was there's this need to restore the Empire and this need to, almost this need to restore Romulus. And if that person is going to the past to, do battle with Hakeev and try to prevent this thing, you going to the past puts you in a position of having to defend this horrible villain because history must be maintained. That is really...
Yeah, you can't save any lives because the timeline must be maintained.
You can't save any lives, and you have to protect Hakeev.
So
I like that idea.
That's where my
I'm going to
mind
throw
goes.
out a little bit of supposition on my part, is to... Obviously, he goes through the time portal before you, and as soon as he does, you are basically completely overrun by the Borg. Not just like Romulan Borg ships, but actual Borg cubes. And I'm going to go on a limb here and say that he goes into the past, but his control over the Borg technology is not as firm as he thinks. It gets out of control, reforms the collective, and they overrun the Alpha Quadrant.
That's definitely dark.
That's the scenario that you're not involved in, or the timeline as it exists before you enter the portal.
Well, I can actually think of a reasonably good way of doing that he goes back in time and uses some sort of experimental tech to attempt to prevent the Hobus disaster or whatever, but instead it goes horribly wrong, etc.
But I mean, you could definitely have some cool plot with him basically losing control of this Borg technology in the past, and maybe even a certain amount of frustration as what he sees as the means to his people's salvation turning on him and essentially dooming his...
If we took some actual Borg ships and reskinned them to look like those Tal Shiar adapted warbirds.
That would be cool, though. We'd have to stay away from battleships and cruisers.
I think it would be an excellent excuse to run into Nero. Now, you'd have to do it in such a way that, you could get around the EULA, but I think you could be done.
Yeah, I mean, he was wearing a fair amount of makeup.
As long as you don't, see Nero on screen. I mean, in any other method, I mean, it's kind of like how in that one cryptic mission, you talk to Spock over an audio channel instead of a video channel, which was completely weird because of the fact that they actually had a voiceover for that part.
Yeah, they hadn't secured likeness rights though. That's not something they didn't get. They didn't get that till later.
Well, and I mean, I think there's probably an in-story explanation for it as well, as that, you probably wouldn't want to show yourselves to someone from the past, if at all possible.
Yeah. But it just occurred to me, what if, this Romulan Joe going back into the past with Borg tech is ultimately what, or kind of drives, Hakeev to kind of his own exploration of Borg technology?
Oh, that's kind of,
It'd also be amusing if the battle between the two of them actually prompted Hakeev to use a plan that he was originally not actually wanting and reserved as a fallback plan in case things went wrong.
I think it would be fascinating to see Hakeev in that time period. However many years ago the Hobus explosion was.
I mean, because, well, let's face it, what assets did the Tal Shiar lose with the Hobus disaster? I mean, because obviously they've retained considerable asset, but
I figured they must have had a bunch of stuff off-world.
But they had to have had a lot of stuff in the Romulan system, too.
What if it end? So one of the things that has kind of been a odd point is why would anyone in the Romulan government ever set off Hobus? I mean, it's an obvious thing. Is like nobody is in the Romulan Empire is better off with a destroyed Romulan Empire. And it occurred to me, what if Hakiv sets off the Hobus disaster to stop this Borg Romulan general?
Because the alternative to letting him live would be far worse.
Because the alternative would be basically assimilation of the Alpha Quadrant.
Because the story idea would be that Hakiv didn't want to set off the Hobus disaster, but he did it to stop this guy from doing whatever he's trying to do.
Yeah,
that is a terribly twisted thing.
Yeah, because it means that he's basically
it's
starting
time
the
travel.
event that he went back in time to stop.
It's time travel. It should be twisted.
But turning Hakiv into a hero?
Oh, it's
love
brilliant.
Hakiv the idealist. I love it.
I would go with anti-villain, not hero, because let's face it, he's doing something that.
We're saying that setting off Hobus saves the entire Alpha Quadrant.
I know, but
and saying that he wouldn't do it otherwise. That's fucking heroic.
Hakiv is still doing it for his own selfish reasons, not because he wants to save the Alpha Quadrant.
You never know. I mean, being forced to destroy your own planet is a great motivator to drive someone to villainy.
True.
Well,
that's true.
The definition of anti-villain that I'm using is someone who does things that appear to be good, but does them for the same sorts of reasons that a supervillain would do bad things.
Okay, but everything we've just described is not the sorts of reasons that a supervillain would do bad things.
But see,
if this horrible Borgified Romulan general comes back through time and starts really messing with things, and Hakiv realizes that this is terrible, this is bad, and the only way that he ends up being able to stop this guy is to be forced to destroy his home planet and have to live with that weight on him forever. That's not villainous reasons to do something good. That's like some of the most noble possible reasons to be doing something ever.
I like that, actually. I think playing with him being a hero.
Yes, it does appear to be something noble, but Hakiv immediately follows it up with some of the most dastardly villainous plots that we've seen in the entire storyline.
He can certainly twist it to his own advantage.
It definitely would drive him into a dark place.
That's what I like, is that if someone were to do that sort of story with it, it's kind of
almost character development.
It's almost doing Hakiv's supervillain origin story, which is kind of cool.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is what Mark was or H.G. was originally planning, especially since his original mission predated all the Romulan storyline. But it is too good a possibility to pass up.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are just about out of time because I have to edit in Teri's stuff. So, I think that's a great place to end, and I think we should brainstorm plot stuff more often.
And
yeah,
I mean,
no doubt. That was
some good stuff, yeah.
Hero.
I would love to hear the community's thoughts on what would have happened in part 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big. I'd love to hear that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear people telling what their story would be with that.
All right. Well, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.